we're jaded in our older age. We are more wary of stories that might have indoctrination in them. But young people just look at the package and they consume it because it just makes them feel happy. And then years later, they realize, where did I get these bad memes from? Oh, it must have been from this story that I consumed and devoured when I was 18 years old or younger. So a lot of the left knows that you can package stories in this very happy, rainbow colored, uh, optimistic, like Star Trek, which I don't think is necessarily insidious, but
no, I don't think it was insincere or insidious or anything like that. I think it was just a kind of a natural product of the time in which it was created from the people who genuinely had authentic beliefs in that thing. But you can see Star Trek's a great example of how we construct a fictional future and it validates a series of values that we're trying to put across. And I shouldn't have used the word indoctrination. You are right. Persuade is a better word. But you can see the effect that it had. The cause and effect are very clear with Star Trek.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wouldn't even say to people, don't watch Star Trek. If the right says bad art exists, like say a lot of a modernist and postmodernist art is a lot of just crap. And the right just wants to say, hey, look at this crap. Doesn't this suck? And then they stop talking. And it's like, yeah, but there's a whole other half to that conversation. Now you have to point your people towards good art that you want them to consume. And unfortunately, people on the right, center even, they point to things like Lord of the Rings, which unfortunately is like 50 years old. We need more contemporary artists creating art that speaks to current generations. Even though Lord of the Rings is kind of timeless, we need to keep producing and refreshing new stories that have old ideas but have a modern packaging to them, so it speaks to people of this generation. I think that's where we are. It's like a game of King of the Hill. The right isn't even on the hill. They're just saying, nobody should be on that hill. They're losing via absence. There's a better way to say it.
I totally understand what you're saying though. Like they've absconded the hill. They're not prepared, and they expect that the left won't go up there as well. And so no, the left's very happy to march up that hill. Plant a flag that says the personal is political, and therefore it's our personal values that become the political message of whatever it is we're going to put out. And therefore, this is what the culture is flooded with. It's like, why did you allow them to do that?
And we're so addicted on the right, at least in America. I don't know about you guys, but we're so addicted to conservatives. No, I suppose not. Well, your center is probably very left for us.
Yeah,
but that's why I think I agree with. I don't know. What I would say is the right-leaning European, to me, is center in America. And I've always felt I'm closer to the center in American. I don't want to get too into that, but I just don't like that we're so addicted here to criticism and punditry as if that's the end product. But the role of the pundit is to clear space in the culture for artists to come in. And now that the playing field is leveled, now that, let's say, for instance, the Budweiser thing in America, now that we're not drinking Budweiser, what are we going to drink instead? Do you have any recommendations for, I don't know, independent craft beers or something? No, just don't drink Budweiser. Do you want to, hey, here's some right-leaning people that you could recommend? It's not even part of the conversation. They say, don't shop at Target, but they don't say shop here instead. Or we have these independent people making clothes here in America for children, let's say. We don't uplift our creators. We just want to chop down our enemies. And you can't just subtract. You also have to add. So I'm annoyed at the addiction of, it's sort of like rage. What do you call it? I guess it's just something like, I want to always be attacking, but never building. Something like that.
It's also very easy to be the critic, right? If you're just charged with holding a particular fort or something, okay, that's easy because the walls are on your side. But if you've got to go and take someone else's fort, well, that's the difficult thing because now you've got to get over their walls. And this is what in Britain, the Conservatives don't do anything, but at least in America, they have at least, like say with Target or with Bud Light or whatever, they've at least got their defense game on the go, but they need to start aggressively asserting their own values. And exactly as you say, okay, what does that look like? And then, like you say, Lord of the Rings. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Lord of the Rings as much as the next person, But how does that speak to some 16-year-old with a smartphone who's getting bullied at school and being told that they're bad because they're straight white male? That doesn't speak to them. It's a different question that Lord of the Rings answers. And so we need
Yeah.
something that's contemporary, surely.
Something that will just make you feel like you don't have to reach 50 years into the past or 2000 years in the past to find people who think like you.
Mm,
It's so silly. And now if I'm a young man looking up to older men who, role models and that sort of thing, who am I going to look at? Oh, Marcus Aurelius.
mm,
But I can't talk to Marcus Aurelius. Who am I going to talk to in our modern day? Who's making art today that I can ask questions? You can get your father figures and stuff like that. A lot of guys growing up nowadays don't have fathers around to ask questions to, so we look at role models. Um, on the right, where I'm not a huge expert on this, but there's the big five personality traits, that sort of thing. And some people say that people on the right are low in trait openness, for example.
mm,
And that's part of the reason why they are conservative, because they want to hold on to old, proven ideas instead of going out into the wilderness, which is scary. It's chaotic. Who wants to go into the wilderness?
mm.
And the funny thing is, artists, by their nature, are curious and experimental, and we're willing to take risks. So I don't know if I'm just higher in trait openness than other conservatives, but I am willing to go into the wilderness of ideas and just, without judgment, observe, take notes, create my own stuff. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm not afraid of embarrassment. Um, but they just want to stick to what's proven, like the safe bet. But that's not where art is. Art is in that weird place of dreams, and it's in the subconscious, which is scary. A lot of conservatives don't like to explore the subconscious because sin is in there. And I don't know, it's like they're afraid of what they're going to find because it will contradict what they have decided they already believe, something like that. And it's very frustrating.
I think you're making an important point about them essentially losing the young, though, without because of their fear of being unable to actually sort of breach frontiers or something like that. Um, I think you're totally right. Like saying, I like Lord of the Rings, but I can understand why a teenager now doesn't really understand or care about Lord of the Rings, because there are certain series of steps you have to arrive at and have to have gone through to get to the understanding. Oh no, Lord of the Rings isn't just about a bunch of hobbits and a wizard. It's actually about a grand narrative of the cosmos being restored to the correct order, right? And if you're 16, you're not going to get that. So you need something that's a bit more smaller scale, something that speaks to you in your real life, in your everyday life, something that you can actually relate to. And the conservatives, as far as I can see, and maybe it's just my blindness on this, but I'm not seeing much in that way. In fact, that energy seems to just be channeled into pure political activism. And it's like, well, that's not what people do for fun, or at least not what most people do for fun.
No, and so many young people have their messiah phase, they say, when you're in your 20s and you want to change the world, even though you
Mm,
barely know anything about it. And I understand that. But like, young people don't understand the world, and they are afraid to ask questions to their parents. Let's say if I grew up in church and I had questions and I was going through my doubting phase for Christianity, I was too afraid to ask my parents or even people in church, like, hey, I'm really doubting what I'm believing.
mm,
How do you as an adult believe this stuff? And I was scared to ask because they would give me answers of, judgmental questions, let's say.
mm,
So then I would go online, and then I would start asking questions online. And then unfortunately, you have the side effect of young people where the internet is now their teacher, and who knows what information they're going to find out there. Um, so that's just an unfortunate part of growing up in the internet age, is if you're ashamed of asking a question to someone you trust, you'll just find those answers on your own. And then in your 20s, you now think you know what the world is all about. And now you want to go and change the world, but you don't understand consequences. And
mm,
maybe people have already made your mistakes and you're just repeating the mistakes of, say, communist China, and you don't understand where this is going in 20 years after you have your utopia that you are trying to achieve, and people are starting to starve and be put into camps. It's like, oh wait, if only I had known about this,
mm.
but no one told you because you had biased teachers. the college professors are now the pastors instead of, actual pastors in a church setting, let's say. I'm agnostic, by the way, just to clarify. But I wish that, like, if I had questions that I wanted to, if I wanted role models to understand, so I can map the world better, I would read stories, because that's a safe way for me to interact with ideas that I didn't even know to ask about.
Mm.
But I'm still trying to understand, what is a man? What is an adult? Who do I want to be when I'm older? And teenagers and people in their 20s are asking themselves these questions. And unfortunately, the only people answering those questions are creepy teachers and drag queens. And no one on the right seems to be wanting to intercept these young people and say, no, it's okay to have these questions, and I'm going to give you answers if you're ready for the answers. But a lot of, I don't want to get too into this, but like, a lot of the right here are kind of prudish, and they don't want to answer certain questions or even talk about certain subjects that young people are asking about. But unfortunately, that paves the way for really creepy people to teach kids about things that maybe the kids aren't ready to learn. But that's a different topic for me. That's the loss of innocence topic,
Well,
which
I think there's something to this though, because I actually think Andrew Tate is a symptom of this. I don't
that's
have any
fair.
personal animus against Andrew Tate, and I don't even see him as being necessarily an irrational response to the circumstances that we're in. But if the kind of man who becomes the symbol of masculinity is Andrew Tate, then that speaks to the sickness that underlies our society more broadly, surely, right? I don't want Andrew Tate to be the role model for young men, and yet that seems to be what has happened. And so we have to surely look back in on ourselves and say, okay, how did we allow this to be the case? And the pornification of the culture, the complete collapse in standards of masculinity, I think are a massive factor in this. The fact that Andrew Tate, again, I don't want to get in trouble, I don't want to be angry, but like, he is proud of making his money in a deceptive and essentially parasitic way through pornography. And it's like, that's just not virtuous. That's just not impressive. And it's a real shame that when he got arrested, not like, obviously I don't think he should be arrested, but like millions of young men around the world were protesting about this, on social media, some of them out in the streets. And it's just like, really, this is the guy, is it? What's he done that's noble or good or virtuous? And no one can answer. He just made himself phenomenally wealthy at the expense of cam whores and simps, right?
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.